Welcome to Chautauqua People. I'm John V. My guest today is Dick Karslake. He comes from a well-established Chautauqua family. He's the third member of the family to sit here at the table. He's a native of Kenilworth, Illinois, went to New Trier High School, graduated from Dartmouth. Then he worked for a variety, had military service. He was in Heidelberg at headquarters, United States Army Europe, worked on assignments for soldiers across the entirety of the Europe area, being both in France and in Germany. He met his wife in a choir there, and then came back to the States and had a career in the food service industry as a supplier's representative to various agencies. At one point he was heavily concentrated in Pennsylvania between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and then worked for some others that brought him up into the northeastern states. Tell me how your family got to Chautauqua.
Well, I think they had connection with Lewis Miller. They were from Ohio, from Warren, Ohio. And they were familiar with him and knew of him. And so my grandmother said that she had been coming to Chautauqua and staying at the Keystone from the age of 10 on up. And that put her here in 1875, 1 year after the institution started. So family's been coming ever since. My mother was here every year for 93 years. And of course, loved every minute of it. She'd leave father in Chicago to do the work, and she'd bring the family, I'm one of 5, to Chautauqua for the summer. We stay with the grandparents' house and just have a heck of a good time getting to know Chautauqua and enjoying the summer. It's a great place to grow up. Absolutely fantastic.
Now, there were several Karslake homes along the years. How did that happen?
Well, most of them were king homes. My mother was a king.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother, the one I was referring to earlier, stayed at the Keystone at age 10 with her mother and grandmother. And they used to have, she said, Sunday morning pancakes on the second floor of the Keystone every Sunday. Mm-hmm. In any case, they stayed at the Keystone until the Athenaeum was completed in 1881. And then they moved over to the Athenaeum. And they stayed in all the corner rooms of the Athenaeum, both floors, and they knew the Athenaeum well. I have no idea how long they stayed, but they enjoyed the Athenaeum. I do have an interesting photo of my grandmother with her mother and grandmother standing in the southeast corner on the second floor of the Athenaeum in a room that is no longer there because it was removed when they put that bridge across to the annex. But it pictures these 3 ladies and shows the rest of Jane's. You can see the women's club on the right is going down the hill, and at the bottom of the hill in the lake is a steamer moored on a pier, a short pier that went out into the lake. Mm-hmm. And as a boy, I used to ride a kayak around there and see these piles below the surface of the lake, and had no idea what they were for until I saw this picture basically just a couple decades ago and realized, my golly, there was a big dock there. They didn't all leave from the pier building, they left from Jane's as well.
Really?
So, yeah, interesting.
Okay, now tell me about your family buying a house.
Oh yeah, well, grandmother, while she was staying in the Athenaeum, got married and had a child in around 1892, something like that. And she would stay there with her child, and she lost that child to some childhood disease about 3 years later. And so when she became pregnant in I think, somewhere around the end of the century, 98 or 99, she said to her husband, and I can hear my grandmother saying, "Walter, I will not stay in the Athenaeum stay in a hotel with that new baby. We have to have a house." So anyway, a builder from Chautauqua came to New York City where they lived and laid out blueprints on a table, in the dining room table. And they liked what they saw, and they said, go build it, we like it. So he went back to Chautauqua, this was like early February, and the house was ready in June. But blueprints were new, John, at that time, and they somehow got inverted. So that big bay window in the dining room that was designed to look at the lake looked at the house up the hill. And the stairway was on the downhill side. And now they've since added a porch on that downhill side, which really made the whole thing mute, but it was, for a while, it was a real shock that the house was in fact inverted. But they had that house because grandmother, her father was a developer in Cleveland. And at one time, Lemuel Southern had more property in Cleveland under his name than any other individual or developer or whatever. And he got paid over the time in 3 separate lots at Chautauqua for some of his projects. And so he said to his daughter, well, Kitty, you can have any one of these 3 lots. Which one do you want? And so she checked them all out. The first one is around the corner of the bell tower. You head up North Lake. You take that swing up to the left. And there, if you went straight up, you'd hit what is now the Howard Hanson house. And that was the lot that my great-grandfather owned. But the lake flies were horrible that night. So she said, no way am I going to stay here or live in this area. So she scratched that house off the list. The next house was down the corner of South Lake and South Avenue. That was the Hines property. It later became the Hines house, owned by Fred Hines and his family. But that was so far down, so far away from everything. It was too far to walk. They didn't want to go that far away from the center of activity. The third lot was on Peck Avenue. Now, at the base of Peck Avenue is Bishop's Garden, where Bishop Vincent's house once stood. And she said, well, if Peck Avenue is good enough for the bishop, it's good enough for the Kings. So that's where they built their house. Now, her father-in-law was the one that had the house at 45 North Lake. And he bought that house from the gentleman who founded the Daily, whose name escapes me. But he left institution in 1899 or 1900, and that's when my great-grandfather bought that house. The only property, according to my mother, who was very proud of that fact, that went block to block at Chautauqua, filled the whole block. But anyway, so he had that house, and then Mother played in a house down the lakefront. It was a couple blocks over at the foot of Merrill. That was just a friend of hers was down there and spent a lot of time there. Loved that house. And said, someday I'd like to own this house. And that was 44 South Lake. And that's the house my father did, in fact, buy around 1950 and has owned ever since. The family's owned ever since. So, but Mother was very esteemed in Chautauqua. She was involved in everything, involved in CLSC, involved in the Women's Club, and did lots of things. She just loved doing anything and everything at Chautauqua. She was involved in the dance. She was a ballet dancer, as every young up-and-coming lady in New York City was. They had to have some ballet, and she was no exception. But she loved it and did very well. And she was involved in CLSC, which I'm now involved in, but she was involved and was responsible for doing a lot of things for CLSC along the way, whatever she could do. She would just get involved.
Right. Now, where did you spend your childhood? What house?
On Peck Avenue, 10 Peck. That was until I was going to college, and that's when Father bought the other house down on the lakefront.
Okay. Now, the big house is still used. How many people are normally there for dinner?
Well, 16 is very common, but we have, I'm one of 5, and my oldest brother had 3 boys, and they come to Chautauqua. My other brother had 2 kids, and they both come to Chautauqua. I have 3 kids. They're not as regular, but they do come to Chautauqua. And my sisters, between them, had 5 kids, and they all come to Chautauqua. Now they're all having kids, so it's usually a good-sized family gathering, and it's just a lot of fun and a great place to have a family reunion. One big house, and everybody gathers on the porch and gathers around that unique dining room table, which, by the way, just pulls out like a all those roll top desks. It just pulls out roll tops at either end, and all these slats come up and out it goes.
Really?
Yeah, really neat.
We should get a picture of that sometime.
Yeah.
So what are the sleeping arrangements with so many
Well,
people?
yeah, there are 4 bedrooms on the second floor, and there's one on either side with one in the center, all of which have doors to the upstairs porch. And this side of the porch is where the boy kids sleep, and this side of the porch facing the lake is where the girl kids sleep. Now you dress in your parents' room, wherever that is, and then you go out on the porch and spend the night in the cot. And there's no place like sleeping on the porch. It's wonderful.
And so the cousins are all there, shoulder to shoulder, whatever.
Oh yeah, they lay awake at night and talk to each other and get in trouble, make noise. And Father used to always be leaning out from the porch on the below, looking up, saying, "Hey, quiet up there," whatever. And but we still loved it, and it was still fun.
And so that's still a family tradition for the kids.
Absolutely, they all love it, and there's a bunch there now, and there are always more coming. We just heard of a new pregnancy the other day, and so it's another child, another Chautauquan is on the way.
Good. Now tell me about what do you do for 4th of July with all these folks?
Celebrate, John. They all, and in case there's an overflow, and from time to time there is an overflow. We don't have enough room. Of course, Marianne and I had our separate house for years that we just got rid of, so we could take a few up there, but I know my sister's father and her brother stay together in the Athenaeum.
Yeah.
And they enjoy that, so, and from time to time, various family members have stayed in houses with friends and out and around, but they all come down for the big 4th of July gathering for dinner, and we celebrate that way.
And that works out really well.
Oh yeah, works out beautifully. Nobody goes without finding a place if they want to come.
Now, so you raised your family then on Cookman.
Yeah.
I had a house there, and we sat and did Dan's interview on that porch a few years ago. And that worked out reasonably well. Tell me about your family's experience in club.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. My brother started, my oldest brother started in club in 1936. At age 6, he was born in 1930. And then my brother took, followed behind, and then I followed behind. And every year since 1936, there has been a direct descendant of my mother's at club since 1936, either as a grouper or as a counselor. And there's a counselor down there now, as well as a grouper, I guess just one grouper. The other one's going to children's school. So they're all in the system, working their way down and working through. So
Are they going to give you a Karslake room down there, or
it hasn't happened yet. It was interesting. My oldest brother uncovered the old bowling alley that was down there in the old athletic club before the Beeson Center was constructed. That was being used for storage. They had boxes all over the place. And he had lots of enthusiasm, so when he saw those bowling alleys down there, he cleaned out the whole darn place, and they brought back bowling for a number of years until they tore down the athletic club and replaced it. So anyway, a lot of involvement by a lot of Karslakes at a lot of different levels in Chautauqua in different ways. My daughter was involved in trying to save the pier building that they wanted to tear down at some point. My son drove one of those little things around with tourists or people getting from point A to point B, those not big buses, but those stretch, trams. So they've been involved one way or another. They've all worked for institution, either on the main gate, or one son worked at the carry and washing dishes for a couple of summers, and had the potted hands to prove it.
Dishpan hands.
Yeah, and how.
Now, I understand you were a sailor.
Yeah, I started 1947, I think. I found a little moth sailboat with 11-foot cat rig, And we had about 6 moths at the time from around the lake that would race from time to time. That's when Paul Sample was the Commodore of the Yacht Club, and he was also the starter of the races. He was also the chairman of the committee for protest committee, and he did it all. And when you started the races, you started the fastest fleets first, and then 5 minutes later would come the next fleet, and then the next and the next. We had the Sea Skulls, you had Lightnings, you had Comets, and then the Moths. So the Moths started last. And so Paul Sample would be out there waiting for the Moths to finish, because they were the slowest. Not only did they start the last, but they were the slowest. And by the time we got all the way around, all the other classes had finished, and they were done. But Paul Sample would just stand there and wait for the final boat. Many times I was the only one moth racing. They didn't all show up all the time. So I sailed around the course by myself. And he would stay there until I came across, and he'd shoot off the gun for my victory and before heading back to his own dock.
And then you would get the points for winning your class.
That's, only 1 point because I was the only boat in it, but I had enough singles and some of the other races,
So you made out. And how many crew was on the Moth?
Just one person, the skipper.
One person.
No skipper and no crew.
So that settles it immensely.
Yeah.
Now you participated in many organizations at Chautauqua. Many folks will remember you for 30 years of service at the old First Night as Master of Ceremonies.
Yeah.
Tell me
that was a labor of love, John. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. The enthusiasm of the kids and the audience when they get to stand up and if it was cheering for their state or just proud to be Chautauquans for 20 years or 40 years or 80 years, they all enjoyed it, and that was a lot of fun for me, very enjoyable.
Was it difficult?
Well, it was difficult the first few years because I wasn't used to that size of an audience and that size of facility. But I got used to it and got more relaxed as time went on, and I really enjoyed it a lot. There wasn't as much interest from the colonnade as I had hoped there might be. So it got to be a little more routine than it perhaps should have. They weren't quite as innovative as they might have been in terms of supplying a surprise this year, a surprise guest or whatever. But we did what we could with what we had, and it was still a lot of fun.
It was basically a fundraiser, is it not?
Yeah, and I remember when Arthur Bester used to stand up there, and the chairman of each of these organizations would march up to the podium, and a lady from the Women's Club would struggle up to the, shakily up to the mic and say, "The Women's Club is proud to give, $45,000, and the cheer from the crowd, and she'd go on her back and sit down, and they would parade one after the other. The city of Jamestown would come up, and the sports club would come up, and so forth and so on. And it was strictly a fundraiser. And then you had the Doc Sharp and Al Broadhead, those two old timers. Sharp Field and Broadhead was involved with the swimming. These guys were old buddies, and they would clown around on Old First Night on the stage. One year they had gold bricks down on the stage, and as the money came in from the announcements, they'd load up a wheelbarrow and take gold bricks, wheel it up the stairs to the top, and in front of the organ, pile these bricks, build a wall of gold. And they were constantly clowning around. It was very memorable to me, very enjoyable, and they had a great time doing it. There were a lot of people that used to perform at Old First Night that really gave the crowd a thrill, and a lot of homespun entertainment and talent.
And the organ played throughout a good portion of that, did it?
Oh, yeah. I worked hand in hand with Jared at the time. And he would, when it came to the Battle of the States, New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, and he had, and where the rest of the people were from, when they were from south of the Mason-Dixon line, he'd break into Dixie on the organ, and people would sing the first couple lines and cheer and be happy and sit down. And he had music for each of the areas that we talked about. People from west of the Mississippi. He had California, Here We Come. And so he was very innovative and did a great job on the organ to make Old First Night a lot of fun.
Now, you participated in several organizations
Yeah.
besides that. Can you just tell me about those? You had some leadership positions, did you not?
Yeah, well, I was a Commodore of the Yacht Club in '91, which was the first year that we had a Sea Scouts national, not national, regional. No, it was national. It was National Sea Scout Championship at Chautauqua. The Sea Scouts had never come to Chautauqua before, and people in the Yacht Club just rose to the occasion, took responsibilities, and took care of all the details, and it was a very successful regatta, so successful that the organization came back at the earliest possible time. They go to the Midwest, and then they go out. They come back to the Midwest, and then they go out. So as soon as you could have them was every 4 years. So in 1995, they were back. And we managed to wriggle some time and some space at the Athenaeum, and of course claimed that was our yacht club headquarters, and that was quite impressive as a yacht club headquarters, as I'm sure you understand.
And you had some other organizational.
Yeah, the CCVA, the follower-up to the Chautauqua Art Association.
And that was Chautauqua, CCVA stands for?
Chautauqua Center for the Visual Arts.
Okay.
And Judy Gregory got me involved in that. She was the president, got me on the board, and then asked me to follow her as vice president and then as president, and I served there for a couple of years. And it was during the time that we folded the CCVA into the institution, because the institution had the School of Art, and it made sense if we could have the Art Association and the School of Art a part of a big single entity, give it a lot more prestige and a lot more to offer. And then I went from there to the CLSC, and I've been president of the CLSC since '06, I guess, or thereabouts. And we've made lots of changes to Recognition Day, to embellish it, to make it more meaningful, more memorable, and have a greater impact on those reaching graduation at CLSC. And we've added all the postgraduate classes and categories, and people now striving for that. And so we've made a lot of additions that have pumped up the class size, and it's now more regular. We're getting 90 to 100 on a regular basis. Last year, to be accepted, of course. But
and what does one have to do to complete the program then?
Well, completing the program has not changed. It takes, I think it's 12 books to graduate, and then you have to, if you get to the first postgraduate category, which is the Guild of Seven Seals, you have to read another 14 books. And then there are another 21 books after that gets to the next category, and another 28 books after that gets to the next category. So we now have categories that require as much as 201 books from the whole list for the whole period. We have over 800 books on the list, adding books every year, so it's a big deal. There are people just clamoring to get to that 201 category.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And do they have to buy the books, or just acquire them somehow, go to the library?
Well, generally, we encourage that, and of course the institution likes to sell the books at the bookstore, and you can understand that. We do have a collection, however. There are two collections around. There's a complete collection in the archives, which stay in the archives, but we also have a collection at Alumni Hall, which we loan out. You can read books at Alumni Hall. The problem is that the books walk, so we're trying to devise a system whereby that doesn't happen, and that's not easy.
Let me shift gears for a couple of moments here.
Sure.
in our final few minutes. You have a long perspective and a deep family background in Chautauqua. How has it changed over the years?
Well, my feeling is that I used to come to Chautauqua because it was a throwback in time. You step back into a gentler world, a gentler time, and that it was a change from the outside world. And whereas now you can't get away from 24-hour news no matter where you are, and that influence is dragging you, not necessarily willingly, into all the everyday problems, which is different from being in a throwback world where it doesn't have all those problems. And the unpaved, the relatively unpaved streets, the walking community, all those things is what you learn to love as a child growing up here. It just is very comfortable. You get to meet families in total, several generations from one family. You don't have that opportunity in any other location. That's where Chautauqua is really, truly unique. So.
And part of this perhaps is because the stays are shorter.
Oh, no question about it. And no place is as safe. You can let your kids run free in Chautauqua, which you cannot do anywhere else.
Now, if you had an old friend at Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, and that person said, "I'm thinking of taking my family to Chautauqua," what would be your reply?
If you're thinking of doing it, I would say don't miss the opportunity. Get up there and experience Chautauqua. It's a different world. It's, as I say, it's a throwback in time. You enter those gates and you are immediately surrounded by a whole different universe. And then you discover that you can learn things at Chautauqua. And they have a symphony orchestra that plays 3 nights a week. Where else do you get that? And you can walk in and sit down and take it or leave it kind of thing. And a world-class lecture series. You don't find those kind of things anywhere. And the Sunday morning services where the speakers come from all over the world and are the best anywhere. And they're just incredible, and it's an incredible place. And to hear that Massey organ, the largest outdoor organ in the world, where else can you experience so many fantastic things as you can in Chautauqua? It's truly unique, no question.
This is a great point to finish up. Anything else we need to cover?
Oh, golly, John, I don't know. I'm sure I can talk for hours on end, but we don't have hours.
No.
So I just want to say that Chautauqua is, as I say, truly unique, and it's the kind of place where it grows on you and sticks to you, and you carry with you no matter where you go. And it's why I keep coming back. It's just, I belong. I'm part of it. I can't let go.
Fantastic. This has been fun. Do come back.
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you, John.